lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. When you're racing, it's life. Anything that happens before or after, it's just waiting.
Matt Williams got a brilliant start from the third row of the grid.
He's gone, he's hit him, he's straight off at the chase.
And a half-second lead on with the simmering car in the background.
He has it. Oh, he's round on the last lap.
There's a massive, massive accident.
Next to the inside, what a move, what a move.
Welcome everyone to sunny Sao Paulo for the second round of the AMS Oz 1997 Formula One season. It's the Brazilian Grand Prix. My name's Stairs and it's my pleasure to be joined by Bagzy in commentary tonight. Very good. Now, just having a couple of audio issues right there, as is customary for OBS. So, just while we get that rectified, just going to just pause the stream for a short moment while we fix that. Welcome back. Sorry about that, viewers. It appears we've fixed the audio issues which we were having, which was stopping some of the in-game sounds and Bagzy from coming through, but we've rectified that now. Bagzy, once again, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Des. Good that I'm actually being heard now. It's nice. Obviously, the technical gremlins always pop up at the worst times.
They certainly do. Well, let's have a look at the race info itself. Bagzy, you've got all that in front of you?
Yeah, Sao Paulo in Brazil, Interlagos, between two lakes, or something along those lines, I believe it is, in Portuguese. Track length of 4.2 kilometres, one of the shortest tracks we go to, 15 turns, 36 laps. We're doing 154 kilometres, which is half a full race distance, anti-clockwise track, and 2 times tyre and fuel burn.
Absolutely right. So that's the equation that sits in front of the drivers tonight, and a very tasty equation indeed. Will we have many finishes tonight? That is one of the questions on everyone's lips. It certainly was one of the talking points of the very first round, was the number of people who didn't finish. There's the constructors' points for you there. Ferrari on 15 points with Prost on 12 points. They're the only two teams who have actually scored any points, with everyone else not finishing. McLaren, Minardi, Sauber, Tyrrell, they're based in the order in which their drivers finished, or didn't finish rather, in the Australian Grand Prix, followed by Stewart, Benetton, Arrows, and the Lola there. A little bit of a glitch in the graphic showing there. Lola on no points, but they have managed to field a driver tonight, which is something that is going to be particularly, well, I guess the opposite of detrimental to their push to win this Constructors' Championship. More on that later. The championship leader, as you can see there, Luke Joyner, unexpectedly won the first round on 15 points from Brendan Ross in the Prost on 12 points, and those were the only guys to finish that race. So, but based on the form guide and the practice, which we'll get into in a second, that is probably not going to be the way this championship looks at the end of tonight.
Probably not, but you never know what could happen. We definitely didn't expect the championship coming out of the first round to look like this, with only 2 finishes in the previous round. We do have a couple less people tonight, unfortunately. Maybe some people were a bit scared away by these cars, potentially. So hopefully we don't have as much attrition as we did last week, and we have some good racing. We've got Xeris and Lewis Wedding both within a couple tenths of each other in practice. So this could be a bit of a battle shaping up.
Certainly is. Well, qualifying has got underway, and of course we've got a maximum of 12 laps in this particular qualifying session, which has been upped from the limit of 6 as we saw in the first round. So 12 laps means that they'll get more than 1 or 2 runs in, and a bit more of an opportunity to get their eye in this short qualifying session. Well, there is the man currently sitting on pole position provisionally, Xeris, in the MasterCard Lola car. So we didn't get to see that one last week, and we talked a little bit about the history of the MasterCard Lola team, the ill-fated team that never made it to the grid in the real-life Australian Grand Prix. Here it is on track, doing very well indeed in the hands of a racer that, Bagzy, you and I know quite well and have raced with quite a lot in person. But someone who is making their Automobilista Australia debut.
Yeah, first race for Xeris in Automobilista Australia. He's quite the dominant force in the ARW series. I believe he's won all bar one of the championships so far.
He's not quite that many. I've taken a couple from him, but certainly
so
not without an almighty effort to get anywhere near him. Basically relying on his errors, but he's set the benchmark with the 1 minute 15 flat so far.
Yeah, 1.6 seconds ahead of on the timing screens will be as Jay Newhouse or John Newhouse, but that is in fact Lewis Wedding. He's operating under an alias today. That's apparently a reference to Jacques Villeneuve being, let's just say, a bit. I'd say Jacques Villeneuve being a bit difficult, but that doesn't really narrow it down for Jacques Villeneuve, does it?
That basically just describes his character in general, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's quite true, but it's a reference to him not allowing his likeness being in the F1 video games of the time. So they just chucked a bloke in called John Newhouse and referred to him as the Canadian driver.
Yes, I'd say probably a more accurate anglicising of his name would be Jack Newton, I suppose. And Newhouse is probably not quite as direct a translation of Villeneuve as Newton, I would say. But that's merely me being a bit of a pedant.
Yeah, we just saw Luke Joyner there having a bit of an issue on his qualifying lap. Our current championship leader and previous race winner. It fought through thick and thin in the previous race out in Melbourne, and kept it on the tarmac, which is what everyone else could not do, and so he got a deserved race win from it.
And there's a lot of points on for people who finished tonight. We're starting at this stage with 10 runners, which is 3 less than we had last week, and certainly given the attrition rate that we had last week, we would expect that means that anyone who does finish this race will get an absolute bag full of points. And it certainly means that anyone out there watching who wants to get involved in this championship should certainly think about it, because as we see Luke Joyner going off down at the Lake Descent corner, to finish my thought, anyone who wants to join in should, because there's a lot of points up for grabs here, and the potential of a good result.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of people come in the form of Xeris, and that hearing that there might be a series where you can get some pretty good runs in, and especially when there's other people at your level. Xeris is pretty close to Lewis Wedding in terms of overall pace. So yeah, it's should be good.
Yeah, it certainly does mean that Lewis Wedding won't have it all his own way. He's not got any points on the board, unfortunately for him, because of the technical issues that continued to plague him across a number of series, which cost him points not only in this series but in the WEC and V8 supercars. And he was very comfortably out in front in the race in Australia, but of course when technical issues strike, they have no mercy, and it unfortunately meant he went away from round 1 absolutely pointless. And so we're starting this championship from naught. He's just gone to the top, though, has John Newhouse, I beg your pardon. But Xeris is on a quick lap himself. Can he overhaul Lewis Wedding? No, he doesn't. He's 8/10 adrift, so Lewis has put in an absolute barnstorming lap there to jump into provisional pole with a 13.9.
Yeah, he absolutely belted out that one. Is that the fastest time we've had so far, I believe?
It looks like it. Just looking at the timing screens, that is indeed the fastest lap that we have seen in practice. Does not, of course, include any offline practice times, but in terms of practice servers for AMS Oz, 13.9 is we're into new territory. We're pioneers now.
Yeah, indeed we are.
Scott Morrill in third, so he's backing up well for what looks like a strong showing for the Williams team.
Yeah, Williams being the only team to have 2 cars, I believe, this weekend, so they'll be in for a good haul of points if they finish the race, which is, we would have said not a very big if last week, but after last round rather, but after last round we realised that if is a pretty big question.
Certainly is. Cameron Costa, who's not here tonight, was the driver who represented McLaren last week. So talking of two-driver teams, his teammate Andy Simpson has rocked up tonight. So that's his first race for this season. And he's just about to complete his first flying lap. So let's see where it puts him. He jumps up into 4th place. Unfortunately, with Cameron not here, it means that McLaren aren't represented by 2 cars to put the fight up to Williams. But nonetheless, it's good to see that West McLaren Mercedes out on the circuit.
Yeah, it's definitely the prettiest looking car of the year '97, in my opinion. Although some people might be partial to that wonderful Lola Mastercard livery that never saw the light of day. I did see the light of day, just never saw racetrack action in terms of being driven in anger. But yeah, it's hard to drive in anger when it has about the same amount of power as your average Hyundai gets.
Well, to revisit your point about the McLaren being one of the best looking cars, it's a tough year to break into that particular to get to the top of that ranking, because I think there was a lot of good looking liveries in 1997. The Jordan, which unfortunately is unrepresented tonight, was one of my favourites, and so too the Sauber and the Prost. Speaking of the Sauber, there's Rob Dunt coming out of the pits. He is currently sitting in 5th place from Heath Dixon, Ads, Nether, Luke Joyner and Rizzo Coops, who is making his debut here and significantly off the pace there, sitting on a lap time of 1:38, but at least if he can make sure he looks in his mirrors and get out of the way when people get through, this is going to be a good experience for him.
Yeah, it is going to be. Should be a bit of a baptism of fire though, because these are very difficult cars to actually get going fast. ARW is currently not having a championship going, and so Wednesday night was spent in these cars, and I had a bit of a go with them, and they are quite twitchy, especially when you're changing up in the first few gears. Yeah,
a lot of torque, which has probably scared some people off, unfortunately. It would be nice to see a few more people in this server, but I have a feeling I know why they're jumping away. We have taken the damage down to 50%, so driving in these cars, at least you might have the chance to continue if you have an accident, because the problem we saw in Australia was that people were crashing, and as soon as you have one crash with the wall so close, it can very quickly ruin your race. While we've been watching Rizzo, he's unfortunately had to deal with a bit of traffic coming through, and not particularly good for the guys who caught up to him well, which is Ads and already forgotten who the other one was. It was Luke Joyner in the Ferrari. So something that he'll need to learn, see if he can recognise when there are cars coming up behind him, especially early on in the race when they start coming up to lap him.
Yeah, he may be a little bit of a mobile chicane this race, but everyone's got to start somewhere. We saw Osrob jumping into the first round of the WEC Championship, and obviously struggling initially because he hadn't driven the cars before, but he started to pick it up and then did quite well in the round following that. So yeah, there's always room for improvement, and it comes in leaps and bounds at the start.
That's exactly right. The sort of improvements he will see as he gets into it are going to be dramatic. But, of course, it's a law of diminishing returns as Rob Dunt doesn't improve on his time, but consistent, it has to be said, only half a tenth off his best lap. Lewis Wedding and Zeris both have one run remaining.
Yeah, both still in the pits, though, and we've got 2 minutes left in qualifying, so got to probably give about 1:20, assuming you have the perfect out lap, probably more like 1:30 if you want to get out and actually get a lap in.
Well, Heath Dixon's on a personal best lap at the moment. He's 2/10 up, and you and I both spoke with him today in person, actually, about his strategy and what he aims to get out of this race, and if he can finish. He was saying about round one, if he had managed to just keep it on the track, he got unlucky with a collision occurring directly in front of him, which he was unable to avoid. He would have netted a good points, and possibly a good haul of points, I should say, and might have won had things fallen differently for him.
Yeah, well, you'd say that if he'd kept it on the road, he's definitely got the pace on the likes of Luke Joyner, and I think he's
Oh,
gone
dear.
up quite significantly there. That's not the ideal line. He won't be doing that in the race.
Well, hopefully he's
That
got
will
enough
ruin
fuel.
his lap. If he's got fuel, he'll get one more lap in. We'll see.
Well, the
how that
unfortunate
goes.
thing for his next lap is that he's lost it after the final corner, so he won't be up to the sort of speed that you normally would be up to as he comes across the line to start the next lap, because of the spin after the final corner. Thankfully, though, on the other side of the coin, it's a short run to turn 1.
Yeah, you don't lose too much because you're almost on the brakes at the start-finish line, depending on how your braking is. Maybe a bit after it, but it's not as bad as, say, a track like Melbourne or Barcelona, where you've got a long run before you reach the first corner and brake, or in the case of Melbourne Barcelona, where you don't so much hard brake as sort of give them a bit of a tap to get the car to go through the corner.
Well, he's up by half a tenth through the first sector on his PB, but he needs a lot more than that to overcome Rob Dunt, who's about 4/10 of a second up the road from him. Rob Dunt looking like he is fairly similar on pace to Heath Dixon. If Heath Dixon can nail this lap, we'll wait to see what the sector time is as he comes through the second timing split, and he's lost a fair bit of time there, so it doesn't look like he's going to improve. The timer has hit 0, so everyone on the track currently, and there are only 3 cars on the track.
Wedding
just had
and
one
Xeris
more.
both neglected to do an extra run, so front row is going to be Xeris and Lewis Wedding.
Nether is another of the drivers on the track, currently sitting in 8th place, and he will be the next man to cross the line, and we'll see if he can improve. He's got ads up ahead, thick end of a second ahead, so he's got a lot to find, and he's not going to be doing it, I'm afraid, because you're not going to find that kind of time out of the final corner. He's 2/10 down on his PB.
He might manage to if he has had a much better run out of that final corner, because you can gain a fair bit out of there. He's gained 4/10. It's not enough, but it was a significant amount for that final sector, which is pretty much just on the accelerator.
Oh, Andy Simpson jumps up into 4th place with that. Sorry, he was already in
he was already in 4th place.
But he has improved by a significant amount on what time he had before, which just goes to show the gap already he had behind. It brings him to within 3/10 of Scott Murrell, and
yeah, there's only 4/10 between Xeris, Scott Murrell, and Andy Simpson, so that could be an interesting battle behind Lewis Wedding as well.
well, hopefully we don't lose any of them in the early stages of the race. I think they'll all be well aware after what happened in round 1 of the importance of just keeping your nose clean. And, well, Andy Simpson, it has to be said, he came into the practice session very, very late indeed. And I don't know how much offline practice, if any, he's got. But that was certainly, it certainly looks like he hasn't had a lot of practice. And he's getting this time, he's getting confidence with every lap that he drives the car. So watch him, because he might be a man who gets faster and faster throughout the night.
Yeah, we just had Scott Murrell lead the server. Hopefully that's just for a quick jump out and jump back in, not anything terminal, because that would be unfortunate to lose someone before the start.
Yes, well, we lost Scott Murrell on the start last week with the engine failure, so that's another thing we'll be hoping for. Start's going to be tricky on this circuit, but because there is was a slight descent towards the back of the grid and a slight ascent towards the start of the grid, so it'll be a bit tricky with cars sort of balancing with the clutch and the brake pedal to make sure that they actually can get the car off the line without incurring the wrath of the stewards.
Yes, and the AI stewards that do govern automobilists come down with quite the wrath of God in scenarios of, especially scenarios of jump starts, speeding in the pit lane, and corner cuts is where they're at their most vengeful. Less so with blocking and the like. They can't really judge that.
No, but rest assured that gets looked at post-race by the human stewards, and is something that will be looked at every week if there is cause to.
Yes, and one would argue that the human stewards we have here at AMS Oz are equally as dispassionate as the AI is, but well, some people might argue that.
Some people may. We're in the warm-up now, which means the drivers will be going through a little bit of a bit of a briefing, with Lewis Wedding often the one to do that. He is the organizer of this particular series. And speaking of this series, there is, well, round 2 of 17, quite a number of races to go. And a shout out to Chris Fraser, among others, in the live chat, watching along, asking the question. Would have entered this week, but only discovered this just discovered this series, and wants to know when the next race is. Well, I can tell you that the next race is the Argentine Grand Prix, which will be round 3, and from my research, takes place on the 2nd of September. This one alternating with the WEC Endurance Series, which continues next week from Monza, with you and Nether commentating.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one in Monza. I believe we're just doing the regular version of Monza with all the chicanes and stuff, so that'll be an interesting test at the Temple of Speed.
Certainly will. Well, we're going to take a quick break here with 7 minutes to go until the race, so we hope you settle in, get ready for the race, and on the other side of this break, we'll make our predictions. Don't go anywhere.
A lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. When you're racing, it's life. Anything that happens before or after, just waiting.
And it's lights out and away we go. It's a great start from Sebastian Vettel. We come up the inside. They run, but the Red Bull Racing man has got through. The champion's done the job. They're all gone. They're all gone. Tander's off. McLaughlin's off. Big Rube, Richard Petty, and Dale Earnhardt. There's another 7-time champ. Jimmy Johnson wins his 7th NASCAR Sprint Cup championship. Welcome back. 5 minutes to go, and we're, well, we've been talking throughout the break, probably heard us because of a few technical gremlins. We're wondering how many people are going to finish the race. That's one of our predictions. But a more positive prediction would be who's going to win the race. Last week I called it as being Lewis Wedding, barring anything catastrophic happening, but something catastrophic happened. And so we just don't know, because it can be that unpredictable. And I'd say, in honour of the Brisbane Darts Masters going on right now, I could basically put every person's name on a dartboard and throw a dart at that dartboard, and given my inaccuracy with darts, that would probably be as good a prediction as I could possibly go, because it could be any one of these guys if they just get it to the end.
Yeah, I think though, Lewis, Xeris, Andy Simpson, Rob Dunt, you know, if any one of that group doesn't make a mistake, I'd say they're the one to beat. As we're hearing the sounds of engines firing, which means the driver's briefing is most likely over, and we'll see the guys out on the track doing some pit practice entrance most likely, and maybe some start practice. And also we heard we've had an 11th person join us. Oz Rob has jumped in again. Like he did in the WEC, he's come in to turn some laps in a Tyrrell. So we now have 2 Tyrrells on the grid, as well as 2 Williams. Good
to see Oz Rob joining in again for this series. And I'd say that some of these guys who are becoming regulars, such as Oz Rob and Xeris is going to be a regular from now on, they ought to have their first pick of going into a better car, I should say. If the people who have signed up for the more sought-after drives, like the Jordans and the Prosts and the McLarens, well, we do have one of the McLarens here, they should be filled, those seats, if the drivers want to.
But that would deny us the joy of watching this wonderful Lola drive around the track in its resplendent blue, gold, and red.
It's a nice livery, but certainly not particularly recognisable in
Simpson's had a bit of a spin there. That's not ideal for him. It's basically an Adelaide Crows car, but hopefully that's
well, let's hope they
not
make
an
the
omen
finals.
to Xeris this weekend.
Well, he's practicing his pit entry, as you said. I think it would also be a good opportunity to practice the start, as I mentioned before, how the circuit is on something of a slope at the start-finish straight.
Yeah, it's interesting because the people on the front of the grid are slightly, they'll roll backwards if they let off the brake. The people around about 6th to 8th are flat and don't have to worry about it, and then the people behind them are on a slight downhill. So it's a very unique sort of topography, this start line, as Ozrob has gone across and done a 122. So a little bit away from being competitive, but this is his first lap in anger, so not too bad.
Well, it should be a bit quicker than Rizzo Coops, his teammate in the other Tyrrell.
Yeah, one would argue Tyrrell fielding a slightly a team that would be greener than Lance Stroll and Pastor Maldonado in terms of speed and ability to not crash.
Well, yeah, Maldonado did actually have speed, I'll give him that, but consistency was not a trait that I would use to describe him. Not an adjective I would say describes him.
Yeah, and consistency is what you need in these cars. If anything you need, it's definitely consistency.
Well, Andy Simpson, for all his speed, seems to be struggling with consistency. We saw him just off the track again. Xeris practicing his pit entry again. Very, very fast entry here, and he's taking it right to the limit. And that may well be a deciding factor in this race. It is a very fast pit entry and exit, and the transit time is a lot shorter than it would be on certain other circuits. So a two-stop strategy may well be quite viable here.
And Andy Simpson's had another run-off again. Yeah, a full service, and as in entirely topping it up with fuel and changing tyres. The full pit lane transit time is approximately 30 seconds from line to line, from pit limiter on to pit limiter off. So, but obviously if you're going to do a two-stop, you're going to be stopped for probably 5 seconds shorter each time. So yeah, it'll be up to will the tyres, is it faster on new tyres than people can manage on the slower tyres.
And we've had a bit of conversation with some of the drivers, and a lot of them with differing ideas about what the fastest way to get to the end of the distance of this race is, whether it's hard tyres, soft tyres, one stop, two stop. So if they're allowed to carry out their planned strategies, we may well see quite a variety here tonight.
Yeah, I hope so. Some of the eagle-eyed among you may notice that despite this being a 97 mod, we are using a new version of Interlagos. That's what we have available to us in game, with the pit lane that now sort of sweeps away from the track rather than being essentially integrated into the racing line for the pit exit. So it's a bit safer for all involved, really.
Yes, and I believe with some of the other circuits that we're going to that have been modified since 1997 in slightly more dramatic ways than this one, we will be aiming to go for the circuits that the way they were in 1997. Monza being one of the examples with a different chicane at turn 1 there. And Xeris practicing much further back there. His start, once they get 2 practice starts, or maybe not, as time elapses on that warm-up session, he'll be starting a little bit further forward than where he was practicing there.
Yeah, it's probably not the best one to practice there, because he was practicing on a downhill section. He's going to be parked on an uphill section, so we'll see how that goes for him. Hopefully we don't see him jumping the start or rolling back too far.
No, well, now comes the moment of anticipation where the drivers grid up, and no one doing it just yet. There's plenty of time. They get the thick end of a minute to do so.
Yeah, we'll find with these cars as well. We saw people blowing up we saw Scott Murrell blowing up on the grid, I believe it was, in Australia. They won't want to hurry out there, because as soon as they get out there, the engine temperatures start to rise, and it's definitely not what you want.
Yeah, so it's certainly means that we'll be focusing on the guys at the back of the grid when they form up, because that will have a significant bearing on how high the temperatures of the guys who grid up first and second, what those temperatures are like by the time we actually get going in this race.
Yeah, it's, hopefully everything goes all well. I know in testing for this track there was a bug at one point where everyone was lined up, but nothing, the race decided they didn't want to start. So hopefully we avoid those sort of things tonight.
Well, they're on their warm-up lap now, so let's take you through the field. And Lewis Wedding, operating under the alias of John Newhouse, the Williams Renault team, he is your pole sitter. He nabbed pole by 0.8 of a second over Xeris. His debut for Automobilista Australia and this series, but make no mistake, he is a very experienced steerer, running in second place for the Lola Ford team. Behind him, he's sandwiched is Xeris by the 2 Williams. So Scott Murrell running in the second Williams. Let's hope he makes it further than the first corner in this particular race, unlike last race. Andy Simpson rounds out row 2 in the McLaren Mercedes, and I think keep it on the black stuff is the aim of the game in the first half for him. Then maybe he can unleash a bit of pace if it's there. Rob Dunt will start 5th place. He was, I think, fairly strong running in Albert Park until he did go off the track, and that subsequently put an end to his race, so we hope for better things for Rob tonight. Heath Dixon in 6th place, similar story. He got caught up in an accident with Andy Simpson, with Nether and Ads, who is starting in the 7th place for Stuart Ford. Nether in 8th, so those three all close together, probably not as close as they were last week, last round I should say. Luke Joyner, your championship leader, the only man on the track tonight who actually has points. He is in 9th place. Rizzo Coops in 10th. Hopefully just get to the end, that's the name of the game for him. Followed by Ozrob, his teammate, now the Tyrrell Ford. And they've just made their way out of Yunkao, which is the final corner on this circuit. Or the final corner that actually requires you to lift off the throttle, turn 13.
Tyrrell's getting a bit tired getting to the line there, and we see Wedding is right over the line there. Hopefully the game is accepting of that.
Well, he might be just letting the clutch in to roll it back, and Rob Dunt actually the same thing. He's a bit far back in his grid spot. He's just had to go forwards to get into it, but looks like we're almost ready to go. And we wait for the lights here. In round 2, there's a bit of anticipation here because it looks like the lights haven't come on yet, so someone isn't lined up properly. I think I just saw the Stuart Ford get reset. Here we go. The lights are going to get us away. Look, but never stare, as Martin Brunder would say, and we're racing. It's a tardy start for Rob Dunt, and away into the lead is Lewis Wedding. Down the inside, does Xeris go? They're side by side through turn 1. Xeris is going to have a good line around the outside. We've got the Andy Simpson McLaren having a bit of a look, and they're side by side going down to the Deschita de Lago corner. It's going to be Xeris on the inside, but can Lewis Wedding go around the outside? And we got the McLaren having a look too. It's Lewis Wedding. No, it's not. It's Xeris up the inside. They're still side by side. Absolutely hammer and tongs on lap 1 here. Xeris is in the lead, and Lewis Wedding has lost out to Andy Simpson. Andy Simpson up into 2nd place. Xeris with a 0.3 of a second advantage.
Yeah, no holds barred through the first few corners there. Xeris stamping his authority on the start of this race, and Wedding losing out to Andy Simpson. If Andy Simpson can keep this on track, this could ruin Lewis Wedding's race. It's not the start that the Williams team wanted. Both of them losing positions. Pretty clean all down the field as well. I think there might have been a slight contact between Ash and Ozrob.
Huge moment there by Andy Simpson. He was completely sideways as they came out of Merguilo and down to Yunkao, but nonetheless he's kept the position and streaking out to a lead, as you say. Bit of a Vettel move, 1.4 second lead on lap 1, but Lewis is having a look, and he looks like he's going to have the outside line, and he's not going to sneak up. No, there's a bit of a switch back there because Andy Simpson went deep. He tried to defend it, and it's very hard to get the thing stopped. And
he'll have the run on him out of turn 3 here. Out of the Center S's Wedding all over the back of Andy Simpson. He's got the inside. Is he going to have the move done? Pretty easy one there for Lewis Wedding, if he can get it pulled up, which he has just.
And he blocked off the route that Andy Simpson was going to take to try and undercut him and a brilliant textbook pass there by John Newhouse, aka Lewis Wedding. Now, does Andy Simpson have an answer for Scott Murrell, or can he fight back on Lewis Wedding?
Yeah, well, we saw them very close in qualifying, so we'll see what happens here. Wedding not exactly streaking away from the pair of them either. He's slowly pulling away, but Xeris having got a 2-second lead in the time that Wedding was stuck behind Simpson. It's going to be interesting to see how long it takes him to catch up, if he can.
Every single time they come out Maguilo, it's only been 2 laps, but Andy Simpson was absolutely sideways there, and it's living on borrowed time driving like that. Scott Murrell has got a run down into turn 1, but he's backed out of it wisely, and will try and get the run down into Desida de Lago to get the move done where his teammate did, but he's just not quite close enough coming out of the centre S's. Or maybe he is. Andy Simpson had a little bit of a moment coming out of there, and poking his nose out is Scott Murrell, but he's thought once again better of that one. To update you on the rest of the field, Rob Dunt sits in 5th place from Heath Dixon. Luke Joyner's made up places off the start. He's in 7th from Ads in 8th. Oz Rob up into 9th, and Nethers dropped down into 10th with Rizzo 50 seconds off the pace in 11th, so he'll be getting lapped sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's not taking long, as Luke Joyner is absolutely being monstered by Ads at the moment. They're side by side, and Ads has gotten through for that position there, so Ads capitalising on Joyner's mistake after Joyner had got through on him. But back at the front, what we're looking at is the Simpson and Scott Murrell battle, because Simpson is once again gets a bit cleaner out of the final actual braking zone there, and he's got a bit of a gap on Scott Murrell, so he's not going to have to worry so much coming into this first corner, as Xeris sets a fast lap, which is immediately eclipsed by Lewis Wedding.
Yeah, that lead is down to 1.5 seconds. It was out to 2 seconds. In fact, it's been reduced down below 1 second now, according to the screen, the graphic on your screen. And now they're all in the same shot, the top 4 actually, with Xeris just disappearing out of the front of that shot as they went down to turn 4, otherwise known as Desida de Lago, the lake descent.
It's going to be an interesting battle, this, because we know that Wedding is slightly faster than Xeris in terms of raw pace, but Xeris is quite a hardy racer. He knows how to keep people behind, and he's not gonna get bullied out of the position, let's say. We saw, Wedding just sort of make his way by Simpson. He probably won't be able to do that with Xeris.
Lock up ahead of Andy Simpson, but Andy Simpson just looked like he went a little bit deep into turn 11. But as you say, Xeris not going to give it up with a fight, but how hard will he fight early on in the race? We're only on lap 4 of 36.
Simpson's having more twitches in the background there. He's struggling out of that final corner.
And that is such an important corner. It takes you onto the longest straight on this racetrack, very, very long straight. And turn 1 is a very good opportunity to overtake. Very difficult to defend it, as Scott Murrell sets the fastest lap of the race there. So both the Williams guys incredibly quick.
Yeah, that's quite a good lap there from Murrell. He dropped off a bit, as I believe that was Rizzo locking up in front. So it's only been 5 laps, and they're coming out to Rizzo. Rizzo's struggling with the car a little bit, it seems. He's driving it in anger, but hopefully he's able to. Hopefully he jumps out the way, doesn't cause too many hassles for the leaders.
Well, just as Lewis Wedding has caught the back of Xeris, so this is going to be very, very tight. But thankfully Rizzo sees them and he's out of the way. And don't think Xeris lost too much time. It can often affect the leader worse than it affects the cars behind, because it surprises the back marker that you're lapping into realising that he's being lapped.
Yeah, Rizzo did a decent job there. Xeris probably won't be entirely happy, but the leader's never usually happy with the speed at which the flat traffic gets out the way, are they?
Certainly not. Here's the view from Lewis Wedding, and he's certainly not close enough to get too much of a tow. He might get a little bit of an advantage on the top speed, and a small lock-up of the inside front left from Xeris. Nothing too much to worry about. And staying sensibly off these curbs, they can be quite slippery like ice. And now Lewis Wedding faster through the centre S's, noticeably closer as they go into the braking zone into Desida de Lago.
Yeah, Xeris won't be too worried at the moment though, because he's used to this sort of pressure, mainly from you, funnily enough, Stairs, on him all race and just waiting for him to make a mistake. And as you well know, he very rarely does. So it'll be interesting to see how well he goes.
He really does. If he does have a weakness, it is with pit strategy. And if there is a car that's probably not his strength, it would be downforce cars, because he seldom makes mistakes in tin tops. But he's obviously taken on this challenge because he relishes it. And
yeah, Wang's going to have quite a bit
to
run on him coming up the hill here, though. He's held onto him all through the middle sector, so Wedding in prime position now to try and make the overtake into the first corner.
He certainly is. So we watch this one with interest as they come across the line, and he's dived to the inside. No thought of defending that from Xeris, and Lewis Wedding will get it stopped. He certainly does. Xeris might have a chance to fight back into turn 4. Meanwhile, in the background, Andy Simpson has kept Scott Murrell at bay for the time being, but Xeris is going to be close enough to have a run down into turn 4, and close enough he is, but close enough he is not, as he's backed out of it. I think he would have possibly had an opportunity to do that, but he thought better of it. It's a long race, as we keep saying, and he's absolutely attached to the gearbox for the moment. And time will tell whether he's able to run with Lewis long term and learn a little bit or two. But for now, happy to run into second place.
Yeah, he's keeping his back tyres in much better condition than Lewis Wedding, but from the looks of it as well. And from chain to Xeris during the week, I think he's got a pretty clear. You were saying that strategy and pit stops can be his weakness, but I think he's got a pretty clear idea of what he wants to do in his head this weekend. So, barring any unforeseen circumstances, I think he'll do well with his pit stops.
Well, it's my understanding that he's looking to use the harder compound in this race. And I don't know which tyre has been selected by Lewis Wedding, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's run the softer tyre.
Scott Morrell's gone around the inside that becomes the outside of turn 1 and 2. He's to the inside for turn 3, and he's made it through in the centre S. Is a good move from Scott Morrell there.
Beautiful. So let's go back and see how Scott Morrell set that one up. He was just close enough in the slipstream. We know Andy Simpson was having issues coming up to the final corner, and a beautiful textbook move. And just muscles him out the way there as they come out of the centre S's.
Andy Simpson jumped in the slipstream, got him back into turn 4. So that good work, unfortunately, for naught.
There we go, and there is the replay of that move. And it's a very interesting overtaking opportunity, turn 1, because if you are close enough out of the centre S's, it's very easy. Oh, Scott Morrell just into the back slightly of Andy Simpson there. It's very easy to get the move back if you are close enough.
Yeah, it's all about keeping that momentum, and especially when you're on the outside, you've got a slightly better line. You can straight line that corner a bit more, carry that little bit extra speed.
Another battle on track is that of Nether and Luke Joyner, who unfortunately came to blows in the first race. Luke Joyner did apologise for first lap contact with Nether, which ultimately destroyed Nether's race as he was dealing with handling issues from then on, which caused his race-ending crash, and it was to his immense frustration that Luke Joyner would go on to win that race. Luke did apologise, as I mentioned, but Nether will be wanting to win this battle, and he is starting to stretch away in the corners that we've been watching just now.
Yeah, I believe Nether was behind Joyner, and Joyner made a mistake, if I'm remembering their positions from the start correctly. So, but yeah, definitely still fairly close on track, although I think they might be running different strategies.
Yeah, well, speaking of different strategies, and this also should partially go to answer the question of Sam Smith in the live chat, there are hard and soft tyres available to the drivers in this race, and Heath Dixon's one that we were speaking to throughout the day, and he, given what, he was planning to run the soft tyres based on what he saw in practice, how the drop-off was, and I think he was one of the drivers who felt he could make the soft tyres last for a one-stop race rather than doing a two-stopper, which would potentially jump him ahead of someone like Rob Dunt if they were to either two-stop or have their you know, some sort of mistake from on the hard tyres. which doesn't look particularly likely from Dunt at the moment, but contrary to someone like Xeris, who was going to be running the hard tyres throughout.
Yeah, and speaking of that, it looks like the wear amount, if you will, the amount that they've taken out of their tyres, it seems that Lewis is doing slightly less now. He's cooled the tyres down a bit. They're not wearing as much, so he's sort of bringing it more into line with what Xeris has. So I think we might see them pitting at very similar times.
Well, Xeris is staying within about a second of Lewis Wedding, and perhaps that means Lewis is managing that gap to keep his tyres in check. This battle between Andy Simpson and Scott Murrell is by no means over at all. They're very, very close on track. This is the it's a yo-yoing. They're yo-yoing gaps all over the place. But the battle for the lead and this particular battle are they are both the closest battles on the circuit. And
Things had a bit of a lock-up in turn 1, almost opened the door for Xeris, but he managed to get pulled up in time.
We also got Oz, Rob, and Ads fairly close on track, so there is another close battle. So even though we've only got a small field, a fair bit of track action, and I have to say, commendable after last week, is that the drivers, all of them who started this race, are still running after 10 laps complete in this race.
I believe at this point in the last race, as we're on lap 11 now, I believe we had only 3 people left in the race. So, yeah, we've done almost infinitely better than last time.
We certainly have, and well, let's hope it stays that way, and I haven't just put the commentator's curse on it. But, well, at the moment, there would be drivers who miss out on points, since points go down to 10th. And I often say it the other way around when we have an attritional race. Anyone who finishes this race will get points. Not the case so far. Rizzo was relying on someone to retire. It
looks like Nether's being pressured quite significantly by Luke Joyner now. So the battle that started in Melbourne and ended poorly is recommencing with fire and
Brimstone?
a red Ferrari coming up to the Benetton.
Oh, and he's gone!
Altogether.
He's gone! Luke Joyner in the wall, and thankfully he managed to slow it down a little bit before he got into the wall, so hopefully there's not too much damage. Let's go and see a replay of that one. Luke Joyner was trying to apply pressure to the back of that Benetton, and let's go on board to see just exactly what happened. Just lit up the rears, a little bit too early on the throttle, slightly too much steering angle, and they said, nah, into the wall you go.
It's things like this that are the reason that we put 50% damage on for this series instead of 100%, because 100% there's every chance that would have just knocked off a wheel or a front wing, and that would have been Joyner's race just entirely done. So, especially since we've got less people and these are very difficult cars, knocked down to 50%, he's still going to have damage, but he'll live to fight another day.
Well, he's not pitted, but speaking of the pit lane, we do have 2 cars in the pit lane as it stands. One of those cars is Rizzo, and the other one is the Stuart Ford of Ads. So they've both made their first pit stop, and that would suggest that they're going to be running a 2-stop strategy to the end of this race. Oh, and Oz Rob sliding the car around the Ferradura corner. Beautiful sight, that one.
Yeah, bang on for a 2-stop strategy here. Lap 12. It's, lap 12 and 24 if you're on a 2-stop, pardon me. Lap 18 for a 1-stop. But if you think you can get it to go longer, it's better to push longer and have less time stop for fuel and fresher tyres to the end.
There you go. We've got someone else in the chat asking for a shout out, but frankly I don't think there's a point unless you've got a question for me to answer, but maybe you've got a good question for me to answer, and if you do have one, then I'll give you a shout out. Gap is closing down the front, and that is Xeris looking like he's just happy to hang on the rear wing of Lewis Wedding as it stands. He might have the pace to overtake him and try and build a gap. In fact, he's looking closer than he's ever looked into turn 1. He might even have a go, or he might think better of it. I think he is managing this race as it is, and seeing how it plays out after the pit stops.
Scott Murrell's made a mistake somewhere. He's dropped off the back of Andy Simpson now, so there is now a 14-second
He's
gap
in the pits.
between them.
He's in the pits,
And he's in the pits too.
so
Ads as
is
well again.
Ads making a second pit stop. So we've seen in the past issues with drivers coming in the pits and not getting their tyres changed. Maybe that's
yeah, Ads hadn't changed his tyres.
so that's very, very unfortunate for him. That's going to drop him out of contention for the battle that he was fighting in, and that puts him a lap down as well. So that is doubly disappointing from his point of view. Scott Murrell returning to the racetrack. He's dropped down to 5th. And Andy Simpson might want to think of a pit stop too pretty soon if he's thinking of a 2-stop strategy.
Oh no, sorry, Ads has crashed coming out of the pits and he's out of the race.
Oh, so that's our first retirement. And let's have a look at this one. It is a tricky, narrow pit exit. So he was rejoining the circuit just behind.
It's a bit too fast coming out the pit lane.
Yes. Never looked like making that. So that is a very disappointing way to end your race. So, well, we talked about that while they were doing their warm-up, that pit entry and exit practice was vitally important, and it seems like Ads probably didn't do the homework he needed to.
Got Xeris is all over the back of Lewis Wedding. He made a couple of moves into the first corner that almost stuck, and the third corner. They're also coming up on the lap traffic of Rizzo and Joyner. Joyner having some issues getting past Rizzo. I hope Rizzo gets out of the way because this is a very close battle here that we don't want affected by traffic, and he has done so. Yes, sort of. He hangs around the apex there, which does not help Xeris in the slightest.
He didn't really. He can't just vanish into thin air though.
But not too much time lost for Xeris. Now they're coming up to Luke Joyner and Ozrob as well. So this is all suddenly kicked off for the leaders and the guys who are now a lap down. But Joyner doing a good job getting out the way there.
Xeris has got the cog. Xeris has got the cog on his screen that indicates he has selected his pit stop. Whether or not that's just to edit the pit stop, or whether it is to, yeah. Well, Lewis is playing games here.
Playing games.
So Lewis feinted for the pit lane and didn't go in, trying to get Xeris to do it. I don't think Xeris is going to be particularly perturbed by that. And we've got another man in the pits. If we go back, it is Ozrob for Tyrrell making his pit stop. His teammate Rizzo Coops still trundling along there in 11th place. So, if anything, Xeris has lost a couple of car lengths out of the S's.
Yeah, might have just overheated his tyres a bit. Although his tyres are in much better condition than Lewis Wedding's. So, this is why we're seeing Xeris come back in. He's better with his tyres towards the end of the stint. He's able to hold on to them, not overheat them so much. So, this could be the difference when we come into the final phase of the race if Wedding can hold on to his tyres.
That's very, very true indeed. On Scott Murrell, who was racing with Andy Simpson.
Spin, I believe.
Who from?
Scott Murrell has, sorry.
Ah, so that is. I was about to bring him up actually, because from the point of view of his strategy with Andy Simpson staying out on the circuit, he was looking good for an undercut. Until he came out behind Rob Dunt and had to overtake Rob Dunt. He had overtaken Rob Dunt, but by the looks of the timing screen, he is now back behind Rob Dunt, which would indicate, as you said, that he's had a spin. So that would make Andy Simpson a bit more comfortable, who, incidentally, isn't losing too much time to the leaders. He's only 5 seconds behind these guys. So they can't afford to be caught looking at each other too much. Lewis Wedding, in the last lap, has built a bit of a gap. He's just bung out the fastest lap of the race, 15.3. So
yeah,
was he playing cat and mouse here?
Potentially. I think he might have just been in a different phase of the tyres. These tyres do come and go a fair bit, especially if you get too much temperature in them. It can really kill you for a lap or two, and you have to slow down, let the tyres recover a bit. Someone who's definitely going to have to let the tyres recover a bit, Heath Dixon, he'll be pitting at some point soon, because he has tyres that are absolutely shot. Running for the softs on a one-stop strategy from looks of Heath, given the wear he's experiencing. Up in 4th though at the moment, but getting closed in on very quickly by Rob Dunn.
Well, that fits in with our postulations about his strategy, that he was running the soft, and it appears that that is indeed what he's gone for. But, well, with Rob Dunt stopping as early as he did, it suggests that Rob Dunt is going for a 2-stop strategy.
Yeah, and probably will end up catching Heath Dixon at the end of the race at this point, assuming that Heath Dixon can keep ahead of him. Oh, Heath gets very close to Rizzo there, about as close as you dare. So not too shy about lapping back markers there is Heath.
Well, the trouble with this for Heath Dixon is that Rob Dunt hasn't made his pit stop yet, and Heath has. So that means if they're on a 1 and 2 stop strategy respectively, Heath still has to stop once more. And
neither have made their pit stop.
Oh, neither have made their pit stop.
Yeah.
Beg your pardon.
I thought
No.
Rob Dunt had. That was my...
So how did Heath get in front
Heath
of Rob
has
Dunt
gone
then?
wide.
Rob Dunt must have made a mistake for that to happen.
Heath has just made a mistake as well. He's run wide there and has allowed Rob Dunt back through. His tyre is essentially gone,
And
he's coming into the
in.
pits.
Well, that has split the race in half from his point of view, because it's lap 17, 36 out of 36, so he will only need to do a similar length, well, 2 or 3 more laps on the next stint than this one. And time will tell whether he can make that work. We've also got Xeris in the pits, followed by Andy Simpson. So we're starting to see it all kick off now, and this will be crucial. Xeris will need to get himself a bit of an undercut, and the pace of Lewis Wedding will be one that something that we focus on in the coming moments as well. What has he got remaining on these old tyres?
Yeah, it's going to be... Well, is Wedding going to be able to push on these old tyres? Is he going to make a mistake? Because this is the worst time to make a mistake now, but it's also when you've got to give it all you got, your foot to the floor and absolutely go, but the tyres do not want to because they have been punished quite severely so far.
Well, this is a crucial moment for Xeris. He's got to bang out some quick times very, very quickly indeed to try and undercut Lewis Wedding. Mercifully for him, he's come out of the track without any traffic. Well, Luke Joyner is next up on track, followed by Rizzo Coops. He will catch them soon, but not on this particular lap. So all eyes to John Newhouse or Lewis Wedding,
pits.
And he comes. So he's come into the pits just behind Nether, who's also pitting.
So about 30 seconds for a full service, and Xeris was about 30 seconds behind when Wedding came in. So this could be very close at the exit.
Well, Xeris is just coming out of Yungkow now, out of, for all intents and purposes, the final corner, onto the straight. Lewis Wedding is on the move.
He's already on his way, so I think Wedding might actually have this by a decent margin.
Well, let's see how it plays out. Here is Xeris, and here is Lewis Wedding. Lewis Wedding just about to get on the power, but he's got to be careful through this very narrow section. Xeris is coming through the centre S's. Luke Joyner ahead, but shouldn't get in his way. There is Lewis Wedding. He's in the lead still, and Lewis Wedding hasn't grown his lead, I would say, but it's probably about the same. And for good measure, Xeris gets slightly held up by Luke Joyner, probably not too much. Luke Joyner gets sensibly out of the way, and battle commences. So if Xeris wants to win this race, he is going to have to do it on the racetrack.
Yeah, he's going to do it with tyres that are a lap older, so he's going to have to either conserve much better than Lewis Wedding and launch an attack right at the end, or just absolutely go for it and just constantly pressure him.
Now, Andy Simpson has toured the pit lane for a second time, so I wonder if that's the same thing that became of Ads, because that's absolutely destroyed his push towards third place, and Scott Murrell, after spinning, has an advantage of about 13 seconds over the McLaren driver.
Yeah, it's like being gifted the podium place a little bit there for Scott Murrell. He's, Andy Simpson, you're not sure what happens there. It may have been tyre trouble yet again, which is happening surprisingly often, but it's quite easy to forget to change over from old tyres to new ones. And it's ruined a lot of races in AMS Oz so far.
Certainly has. It makes me wonder whether they actually watch these broadcasts, because it's something that's so common and so easy not to do. It's in terms of what's easy to do. It's very, very hard to find a tenth of a second here and a half a second there. It is very easy to not lose 10 seconds or 20 seconds making a second pit stop just by double checking your pit menu.
Yeah, and especially with the fact that we're running 2 times tyre wear, you can't really afford to just think, oh, okay, I'll go out and continue on these older tyres and just go a bit slower, because your tyres are almost dead by the end of the stint anyway, so you have to come back in again. and it is really race ruining.
It absolutely is. The battle we were following before with Heath Dixon and Rob Dunt before they came in to make their pit stops has gone in the favour of Heath Dixon, who is back in the lead of that battle. Rob Dunt looks to have had a couple of issues of late, and he's currently being lapped by Lewis Wedding. And
Nether not too far down the track either from Rob Dunt. There's about 5 seconds between, as Rob Dunt doing his best to make the centre chicane as difficult for Wedding as possible.
When someone someone spun, it's Rizzo. Sorry to cut you off there. Let's have a replay.
Andy Simpson's spun as well.
So that's a bit of an awkward place to spin for Rizzo. We'll come back to the Simpsons.
Andy Simpson is not moving, and Andy Simpson is out of the race. That is a shame for Andy Simpson.
So I wonder if he did end up getting those tyres changed.
No, he definitely got them changed, but something else has happened to him there.
Oh, it's a bit of rear locking by the looks of it. That's a strange one. He was struggling with the car coming into the S's. Went past the stricken Tyrrell of Rizzo and down to turn 4.
It was still a decent... He got around the next 2 corners before he stopped on the track, so I'm not sure what's happened there. Potentially forgetting fuel?
It's absolute. No, it definitely is a big incident, and what he won't like to see is that Scott Murrell has just received a drive-through penalty. So that probably would have gifted the podium place back to Andy Simpson had he not had that crash and that, and that incident in the pit lane as well. So that has unfortunately turned a very promising race for Andy Simpson into nil point for Andy Simpson.
So yeah, Scott Murrell, corner cutting penalty. That's the drive through for him. Not going to cause him too much harm, just because he is.
Lewis Wedding is huge problems there with the Tyrrell.
No, that was Scott Murrell who was having problems there.
Oh, I beg your pardon. That's going to say, but I momentarily forgot that there are 2 Williams in this race. So Scott Murrell eventually makes it past the Tyrrell and try and identify which Tyrrell that is. It was Osrob.
Rizzo. No, it was Rizzo who he had the issue with. Osrob was further down the track.
Are you sure? Because Osrob is the one who's right behind him on track at the moment, according to my timing screen.
Rizzo is quite slow and a bit further back now, but it was Rizzo that he almost ran into.
Take your word for it. Xeris in second place. He's about 2 seconds behind Lewis Wedding at the moment, and given the times that we're looking at, seems like he doesn't quite have an answer at this stage, with half a tenth of an advantage on the previous lap to Lewis Wedding.
Expect to have the 2 stoppers coming in the next couple laps as well now. Scott Murrell with that drive-through, not too big an issue for him, to be honest, because he's got a 40-second gap over the next person, Heath Dixon, so he could afford to come into a drive-through and then come in again and get some fresh tyres on, and he would still be close to Heathy or ahead.
Well, that means we've got a little bit of a lull in proceedings while this we wait for the final pit stop round to commence. And sort out the order.
Sorry to cut across you, but Nether is closing in quite rapidly on Heath Dixon. Heath Dixon, I think, having to tyre save on his soft tyres, and Nether not having to on his hard tyres, both on one-stop strategies, but that gap has come down from 5 seconds about 3 laps ago to now only 1.3 seconds.
Well, that's a tasty little battle to follow, so we might follow an onboard lap with Nether, and it looks like
Joiner's just pit for the second time.
It looks like Nether's got a drive-through penalty based on the graphic on your screen there. Don't know if we can confirm or deny that, but
I didn't see one come up.
No, we didn't, but it can sometimes not show you all the penalties if 2 people get a penalty at the same time.
Although it's showing it for everyone for me, so I think that may be incorrect.
Oh, okay, so Nether fans can breathe easy. Hopefully that is correct and means that he does not have a drive-through penalty. Sometimes Automobilista throws us with its little
quirks, let's say.
Quirks, let's call them, yes, that's a good word for it.
Scott Murrell's going to serve his drive-through soon, or he's going to get disqualified. As he's had a big crash on the front straight, actually, so I'm not sure what happened there.
All right, well, let's go and replay that one. I'll just say, Danny Yang, I will get around to your question when I can have a moment, but so much is happening in the race right now. It's so much... That is a strange one. That was
it's very curious. It's like his brakes just all locked up at once. And
it suggests that if we try and go on board with him... Well, that's a technical failure of some sort. Something has come up on his screen, and I wouldn't expect that to be a human input that Scott made, as Rob Dunt has made a pit stop by the looks of it, and he's going to come out of the pits on track behind Scott Murrell. You'll see him emerge just to your right of screen. There he is. So Scott Murrell, hopefully he's not too badly damaged from that and can continue. He is 37 seconds ahead of Heath Dixon.
I believe he should be coming in to serve that drive-through as well this lap. He's going rather slow there, actually, so I think there might be some other problems for Scott Murrell. He's got passed by Osrod.
I think he's got damage to the suspension. Just looked like one side of the rear was up a little bit higher than the other.
Grabbing a bit. He's coming into the pits now.
Well, it's a bit difficult to tell with some of the lag we're seeing, but awkwardly, he probably needs to pit right now for damage, but he can't afford to because he'll get disqualified if he goes around too many times.
He's stopping though, and I think he might get disqualified as he crosses the line for not serving this drive-through here. Unless he served it without seeing it, but I'm not sure if he did, because he was still the same distance ahead of Heathy as he was before.
Well, that is going to put him behind Heath Dixon. If he has still to serve the drive-through and serve this damage. In fact, even this pit stop might put him behind Heath Dixon if the damage is long enough.
Now, so Heath up into the podium places with Nether closing him in.
Now they're going through as well up into 4th place. So those two having a strong race through the attrition of the others with Andy Simpson adds, and now Scott Murrell succumbing, not out of this race, Scott, but certainly...
I'm not sure if... I think he may get disqualified here. I might be wrong, but...
Well, hopefully he has already served the penalty. We just missed it from our point of view because we want to see Scott continue and try and recover this.
Well, not yet, so maybe he'll be able to do it next lap.
It wouldn't be until the next lap that it would be actually disqualify him if he hasn't indeed not served that penalty yet.
Yeah, if he comes in on this lap and serves it, he'll be fine, assuming he hasn't served it already.
There we go. Well,
out in front, sorry to go across you there. Out in front, the lead has extended out to 3.5 seconds for Lewis Wedding from Xeris. So it looks like Wedding has got the better of Xeris at this point. That's the biggest lead we've seen all race, apart from when Xeris pit. So I think Wedding might have his measure today.
Yeah, he's the only man in the 15s at the moment. Xeris just a 16 flat and about a 3.5 second man. The only man left on the lead lap though, with Scott Murrell's trials and tribulations. Heath Dixon on the podium, and he did say to me earlier today that he was hoping for a podium as his best case scenario, so he's on target for it now, but whether his good friend Nether will wrestle that away from him remains to be seen. But he's the first man off the lead lap, is Heath Dixon.
Yeah, he's lap down, and yeah, Xeris and Wedding clearly in a class of their own today. Were kept honest by Murrell and Andy Simpson for a good first chunk of the race, and you know, if the front two had had issues, then Murrell and Simpson hadn't, they probably would have been fighting for the victory. But in the end, it happened the other way around.
Absolutely right. It's been hard to find a place to shoehorn this answer in, Danny Yang, but to answer your question, who's going to fill Ricciardo's seat in real-life Formula 1, just to take our minds off of this race for a split second? My first guess would have been Carlos Sainz until he got signed by McLaren. I think that's official now. Apparently Max Verstappen vetoed Carlos Sainz as a teammate. Your guess is probably as good as mine. Bagzy, you've been hearing rumours about John Eric Verne being approached by an F1 team, but I would have thought Gasly is a good fit for that second Red Bull seat.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Jean Vergne didn't specify which F1 team. And I've got the feeling Red Bull wouldn't want to take him back just because it might be seen as admission of them being wrong, which isn't exactly Red Bull's MO, really. So I think it might have been a separate team, potentially. Maybe a Haas or something along those lines.
Yes, but we know they tend to go for youth, and that is it would be probably the most likely answer would be one of the drivers from their Toro Rosso team, and I can't see it being Brendan Hartley. So the boring answer is Pierre Gasly.
Yeah, you'd think so. He's the choice, you'd think, but you might say it's too fast for him to come up into the big leagues. But we saw Max Verstappen have a similar time frame that Gasly has had so far. So maybe it wouldn't be a bad time to bring him into the fold at Red Bull. Although I believe that would make Red Bull having the youngest F1 driver lineup in history, potentially, with that have 2 teenagers in a major team.
Well, he's not. Verstappen's not a teenager anymore.
Not a teenager anymore, is he?
But he was when he started. And he was quite a prominent F1 driver for a couple of years, I think, before he became not a teenager. But yes, in terms of the headlines, I think Red Bull would probably love that, having the youngest ever driver lineup in history.
It would be a very, or I'd say an experienced lineup. Despite their youth, it wouldn't be that inexperienced a lineup because they've both got a decent amount of races under their belt, and they've both put in some very good performances as well.
There you go. Well, back on this race, Xeris has closed the gap to Lewis Wedding ever so slightly. He's brought it back under 3 seconds, and it looks like, well, the previous, I think Wedding might have had a bad lap there. He did set a 17 at one stage, and Xeris has almost got a bit of an incentive. He's got a carrot in front of him now because he's picked up his pace. He's down into a 15.6, and now he is the man setting the pace. He's the fastest man on the track by half a second at the moment, and it means that Lewis Wedding can't afford a single mistake here.
Yeah, if Wedding make the mistake as all, Rizzo almost, sorry, I was watching Rizzo and he almost got Luke Joyner up his chuff. Yeah, Lewis Wedding can't afford to make a mistake, and this is probably the most pressure he's been under in a little while, because usually he gets to romp away a little bit, and now he's got something to think about the whole time. Every time he's on a straight, he'll see that yellow and that red and white nose in the mirror, and just be thinking, need to be careful here.
And now there's push on Heath Dixon. He was about 0.2 of a second faster on the previous lap. He needs to find a bit more time there, because the gap to Heath Dixon is sitting around about 1.5 2 seconds. Although it just come down to my timing screen ever so slightly there. Rob Dunt's DNF'd. So let's go and see what has happened. Oh, he's had a massive crash right where Mark Webber crashed twice in F1 and in WEC, and that's a strange place to lose it in these cars. He just got on the inside curb, and that was all she wrote. You go straight to the scene of the accident when that happens. Thankfully, he's not taken anyone with him, and what disappointment for Rob Dunt. He was running strongly.
Yeah, and that was the leader that was coming past him as he had that accident, so that was very nearly a accident involving the race leader, which would have been, I think Wedding might have broken his steering wheel in half if he'd ended up involved in that one.
Well, it's hard to believe it, but we're nearly at the end of this race. Just 4 laps to go, and no wonder Xeris was making a bit of a push for it. Xeris still in the 15s, but Lewis Wedding has responded to Xeris's pace by putting in a 15.2, which is very, very, very quick. And that gap has just grown in the last lap or two, out to a 3.5 second lead to Lewis Wedding.
Yeah, interestingly, Heathy pushing a bit harder now, because he's going to do a lap or potentially 2 laps less than Wedding and Xeris, because he's already a lap down. He doesn't have to go as far on these soft tyres in his final stint. So maybe a bit of, well, I believe Heath did mention that if he gets lapped enough times, he doesn't have to go as far. He had an iRacing race earlier this week where he used that very strategy to be able to get a much better class position because he let the leader pass right at the end to finish the lap, so he had to do one less lap and make it on fuel. So it seems he's doing almost the same thing with tyres here, and he's going to be able to hold off Nether just because of that lap less he has to do.
Well, it'll be some sort of gargantuan effort from Lewis Wedding to lap Heath Dixon a second time, because as you can see, Heath Dixon on the track coming down into Descida de Lago, whereas Lewis Wedding is just coming up to Yuncao right now. So I don't think that Lewis Wedding is going to lap Heath Dixon again, and he'll get the reprieve he needs if he indeed wants to do one less lap, or 2 less laps than the leader. At the moment, 1 lap down, he'll only have to do 35 of the allotted 36, but it's a good thought.
Everything counts for him on those tyres, though.
It does. So Nether certainly will... Oh, and Nether just sliding the car through that hairpin there. That was a beautiful looking slide, but in terms of the clock, that's not going to like it at all.
Yeah, and Nether's got to be careful because he's got Scott Murrell only 11 seconds behind. After that accident and getting his car fixed, Murrell, and losing out on the podium, Murrell's on a bit of a tear here. He's been closing in on them lap after lap. Probably not enough time for him to get to them by the finish, though.
Well, it appears that he did serve his penalty because he's not been disqualified, so that is something that is good to see. Rizzo's Coops in the interim has also retired from this race, but he probably wasn't actually on target to get classified, since 90% race distance is the minimum required to be classified as a finisher, and he was 11 laps off the pace, which is significantly short of that.
Yeah, he would not have been. He actually didn't end up making it past Rob Dunt either, who retired about 5 minutes before him. So, not the best debut for Rizzo, but can only go up from here, and good on him for giving it a go.
Well, change of fortunes. The man who won last round is Luke Joyner, currently last on track with the retirement of Rizzo, but he's still in the race, and in 7th place he's going to pick up a handy haul of points, which will mean he will remain in the lead of the championship after tonight, given that Lewis Wedding, Xeris, Heath Dixon, Nether, Scott Murrell, Rob Dunt, Rizzo, Andy and Ads didn't score any points in round 1, and the only other man who did isn't here tonight.
He's also closing in on Ozrob. He was faster by 8/10 on the previous lap, and they've just come across the line now, and we'll see it update in a second. He was 1 second faster on the previous lap, so he could get him before the end of the race here.
And Nether's charge towards Heath Dixon appears to have been halted by perhaps a spin or something, because that lead, that gap...
Yeah, I think so. He's got Scott Murrell right behind him now.
Yeah, the gap has grown to 8 seconds, and there is Scott Murrell menacing Heath Dixon. And after this lap, there'll be 1 lap to go for them, since they are on the 34th lap, and they'll only get 35 in before...
Yeah, leader has started the final lap.
Here he comes through the centre S's, so we will rejoin that battle for 4th place when we get a chance to, but we're just having a bit of a quick look at Lewis Wedding, because he didn't have it all his own way today. I think Xeris's charge has faded somewhat. He's gone to a 6 second deficit to the leading man, Lewis Wedding, now, but he certainly had to fight for it today and couldn't afford a single mistake.
Well, Luke Joyner's about to have a go at Ozrob into the first corner.
And same story for Scott Murrell and Nether, who absolutely side by side on track. And down the inside, through the final corner, they're going to get 1 more lap in, and Scott Murrell has got up into 4th place. Nether down to 5th.
Yeah, Nether's tyres are a lot older than Scott Murrell's because of that pit stop, so Nether having some issues keeping it on the road. He just can't get the traction down like Murrell can. That spins because Murrell's had... Oh no, that's just some lag, I believe.
And off the screen, yeah, Ozrob has been relegated down into 7th place by Luke Joyner. But take nothing away from this man. He is your winner. That is John Newhouse, Lewis Wedding. And he has won this race. Nether's got by Scott Murrell by the looks of it. We're going to go back and see Xeris finishing 2nd. We've got a bit of a lock-up there from Heath Dixon, who should be fairly safe in 3rd place. But this is the battle we want to see, because Nether has got back up into 4th place.
Heath Dixon has a big issue. He's got massive damage, I think, because he is so much slower than these guys.
I imagine that's a puncture. Oh! He's gone through. He's going to lose his podium on the last lap. What absolute disappointment. Shades of Timo Glock in 2008. Barely 300 metres from the end of the race. And now this is a battle for the podium. So who is going to come out ahead? Is it going to be the Williams of Scott Murrell, or is it going to be the Benetton of Nether? It is an absolute drag race. Stick your foot in it. Can he keep him behind? It's all about slipstream here, but it looks like Scott Murrell's the man who's going to do all this contact there. Absolute. That is a disaster for Scott Murrell. Hopefully that it wasn't as bad as what it looked like for us, but it's never there.
That's
Angry from Scott Murrell.
I think there may be some words had between those two after the race. I do not think that Murrell is happy with that in the slightest.
Well, Heath Dixon and limps
creeps
across the line. Must have been, I don't know if it was fuel. There was smoke, so I'm wondering if there was tyre.
No, I believe that's a puncture. His rear tyre is up in the air, and I think he had a puncture on his front tyre. That's Luke Joyner coming home in sixth. Heath was lucky that he was a lap ahead of Joyner, so didn't lose that position. Osrov is going to come home seventh. But yeah, wow. On that last lap, who would have expected that was going to be a fight for the podium?
Well,
Heath Dixon's going to be kicking himself. I think Nether and Murrell are going to be kicking themselves, and who knows? I mean, if they both get found out as having done wrong, Murrell and Nether, Heath Dixon might get his podium back if he's very, very lucky.
Well, we're just looking at the replay from the onboards now, trying to see whether Nether's steering wheel jinked to the right, and it's difficult to see there. It might be one of those things that we need to get their replay files for, because from Scott Murrell's perspective, what he sees as he tries to go around the outside of Nether is Nether appearing to drive into him to the right, and no wonder he was angry. But what we need to see is Nether's on board with a little bit more high fidelity to see whether that was a deliberate act, because I hate to say it, but I think Nether might have something to answer for there.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of those things we can't see an exact replay of what happens because of the way Automobile Pistol works. We don't get the exact inputs. We get the best approximation sort of thing that the server sends to us. So it'll be interesting to see. We might have to get the views of the other drivers and see what happens. We'll see if a protest is lodged. If a protest isn't lodged, then probably nothing's going to go of it. But that's for the stewards to deal with later on, and on the Automobile Blister Australia Facebook page, you'll be able to see any penalties that get applied and what the final results are. For now, we've got our race winner, Lewis Wedding, has arrived. Lewis Wedding, also known as John Newhouse. Lewis, good win there. You pressured a fair bit by Xeris, though, throughout the race.
Yeah, I found out just after the race there that he was actually running the hard tyres and I was on the soft tyres. So I think we both had different setup philosophies. I took a bit of wing off which obviously helped at the start of the race getting past Andy and Xeris, but then I couldn't quite get away with the slipstream here. I think Xeris is running more wings, so he's just a little bit faster in the middle sector. And if you got close enough out that last turn, with the slipstream he had here, it just he closed right up. So he was able to hang on to the back in that first stint, and even towards the end sort of had a look. So I had to hold on, and then after I got away a little bit, it was a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, it was. It looked like there was a bit of sort of back and forth in terms of the gap seesawed a little bit. Were you worried at any point, or did you feel that you had it in hand the whole time?
Well, in the first stint, I didn't know what he was going to do strategy-wise. I didn't know if he was going to two-stop or one-stop, so I just drove obviously as hard as I could in the first stint, and he didn't really go away. So I was just like, okay, he pitted on lap 18, and I was like, okay, he's one-stopping. So I just hoped I didn't stuff up the in-lap, so got the in-lap okay, and got out in front. And then obviously I think it was a Ferrari or something in between us when I exited the pit, so that gave me a second or two, and then without that slipstream it sort of extended a bit. And then I did edge away a little bit, but then with traffic it would be every like third or fourth lap I'd get the gap up to about 3 seconds, and then I'd have to slow down because of traffic, and the gap would come back down. But for the most part it was pretty under control in the second stint, but the first stint was certainly obviously I was pushing pretty hard.
Yeah, well, an excellent win, led from start to finish, so well done, Lewis Wedding. We've got our second place runner, Xeris. So Xeris, you were close, but didn't quite manage to reel him in today.
Yeah, as Lewis said, he was on the softs, I was on the hards, and I was running a bit more wing, so I couldn't get him down the straights. I was glad to keep him in range for the first stint. I was kind of hoping he would two-stop. That would have been crazy. So, yeah, Lewis pretty much said all there is to say. And his pace at the end was just crazy. I'm surprised the sauce just didn't kill him.
Well, there you go. Sorry, I was just going to ask you about your start there, Xeris, because you got a rocket start into the lead, and well, tell us about that.
So obviously I didn't rev my engine until 3 lights went, because I didn't want to kill it.
Smart.
And then I sort of let it bog down and then short shift and let the torque take me off the line. So no wheel spin, and then that's what got me off the line.
Beautiful. Well done on a strong second place in what is your first race with Automobilista Australia, I believe. First official race, in fact, first ever race, I think, with them. We obviously know that you're not a newbie when it comes to Automobilista, but nonetheless, a different bunch of guys. It's always a bit different. And, well, the other man who was from Apex Rear Wing, well, there's 2 other men from Apex Rear Wing here. We've got Nether and Heathy. And Heathy, it looked like you were going to get the podium there until I believe you got a puncture at the end of that race.
Yeah, something like that. On my first, well, my only stop, I happened to look at the tyres and realised they went to the front right, went to 0% at the top of the hill just before I veered off to come into the pits. And I've got the report here from my engineer. Halfway through that last lap, actually, sorry, more like a third of the way through that last lap is when the front right hit 0%. And front left was at 12, rear left was at 26, rear right was at 19. So I pushed those tyres further than what they like to be pushed, and eventually they just said no.
And just a few corners too early, we saw Nether behind, battling hard with Scott Morrill for 4th place, and I want to bring him into this discussion because, Nether, what did you think when you saw that happen to Heath up ahead of you?
Well, I kind of knew that his strategy was going, when he went in a little bit earlier than expected, that he was going to run the softs and double stint the softs, and I thought, well, that's a little bit dangerous, given that we knew the softs probably weren't going to last if you abused them a little bit. So I wanted to try and stay close to capitalise if it did come to that, and given we were a lap down, I had to make a move and try and make it soon. Unfortunately, I pushed a bit too hard and I lost 6 seconds on one lap. I spun at the bottom of the hill out of Sector 2, and that brought Scott right back into the picture. I had a decent margin over him, and not only did I have to fend him off, but try and hunt down Heath in the hope that I was actually going to be able to get past him for the podium. And I'm telling you now, I had to make that Benetton wide as all hell for 2/3 of a lap after I managed to sneak past on the final lap for us.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing that we saw towards the end of the lap. It looked like Scott wasn't particularly pleased after that. Tell us about that run to the line, because we saw a bit of contact.
Yeah, I obviously had the hard tyres on and he had the softs on, and we were both running up the hill, and obviously I had to defend a little bit. I stayed in to try and keep the line as short as I possibly could, and the car just pushed a little bit wider than I was liking, and I tried to keep it as far away from the wall because I could see he was there, just had a little bit of contact. He probably would have had me with the run to the line. Obviously, if the stewards want to take a look at it, I've got no objection if they want to take a look at it, but I certainly didn't turn in intentionally. It's just the car pushed a little bit up the hill through that turn.
There you go. Well, that's hopefully gives some insight into that. No doubt it'll be something that we probably go back and replay, but hopefully nothing too controversial comes out of that. But certainly a much stronger result for all involved than Australia, with 7 cars finishing, not the dizzying lows of 2 that we had in round 1. But given we started with less runners than round 1, it was a pretty good race in terms of the number of cars finishing.
Yes.
I was hoping Bagzy would pick up on that one, but we'll instead look to the future by showing you what's coming up in Automobilist Australia. We've got the Rookie Cup Round 2 coming up tomorrow from Ibarra in Ecuador, Monday the 20th of August. That one will be on the Automobilist Australia YouTube channel. I'll be bringing the Super Series action to round number 2. Instead, myself and Nether commentating that one. That's going to be Albert Park on Thursday the 23rd of August, followed on Sunday by Nether broadcasting the 2 hours of Monza, round 3 of the WEC Championship from Monza. Funnily enough, on the 26th of August, next Sunday. Well, that's about all we've got time for, so I've been Stairs, I've been joined by Bagzy, and that's pretty much all we have time for in this Formula 1 broadcast. The next one will be Buenos Aires in 2 weeks' time. Bye for now.